Welcome to Trial of the Hollywood Sex Therapist Killer, the harrowing and tragic story of Dr. Amie Harwick, who met a tragic end when she was allegedly thrown off her third-floor balcony by her stalker and ex-boyfriend, Gareth Pursehouse. Found clinging to life, but later succumbing to her injuries, Amie's death has raised many questions, with answers to be revealed in court. Join us as we dive deep into the ongoing trial of Gareth Pursehouse, the man accused of this heinous act, and as we seek justice for Amie.
This is you, right, detective, in the photo? Oh.
That looks like you. No, I'm kidding. No.
All right. This is you, Sheriff.
Yes, sir.
Photo, right?
Yes.
Now, just for reference, just so we can kind of get a sense, how tall are you?
5'10".
I'd like to just very briefly go through the photographs that are on this CD, just so that he can say that he recognizes them and move on to a different topic. These are photographs from inside the house. Is that permissible?
It is, but didn't you ask him already about photographs of the house?
Well,
You said you had 15 minutes. I'm going to cut you off in 10. So no matter how you look at it, you can use your 10 minutes as you wish. But we're just going around circles here now at this point.
All right. So this is ZZ7. This is the patio, right?
Yes.
And these are all of these photos that I'm about to show you, up to ZZ16. These are photographs that you had that you asked to have taken. So this is ZZ8. This is the patio, right?
Yes.
And this is something you had a photographer photograph.
Yes.
ZZ9. Same question, right? You had a photographer take this picture
Yes, I did.
on the 15th of February.
Yes.
2020. ZZ10. Same question.
Yes.
ZZ11. Same question.
Yes.
ZZ12. Same question.
Yes.
ZZ13. Same question.
Yes.
ZZ14. Same question.
Yes.
ZZ15. Same question.
Yes.
And now let's talk about the August 6th visit to Mound Street. So you were present on August 6th, 2020 for a court-ordered inspection of 20...
I'm going to object as to...
Objection is what?
Objection as to form of the question, the information.
Court order?
I'll withdraw it.
Okay, go ahead. Finish your question, counsel.
You were present on August 6th, 2020 for a court-ordered inspection of 2086 Mound Street by Ms. Bernstein-Lev and an investigator Nicely, right?
Yes.
And you had an LAPD photographer photograph the property prior to the defense inspection.
Yes.
One moment.
What's the next one over here?
You are at AAA or A cubed.
All right. I'd like to mark a photograph as AAA.
All right.
Is this how the kitchen door appeared on August 6th, 2020?
I don't really remember.
Okay, is this the kitchen door inside of 2086 Mound Street?
Yes.
On direct, Mr. Avila went through all of the places in 2086 Mound Street where you instructed the criminalist to swab, right?
I believe so.
There were no other swabs done on surfaces in the house that Mr. Avila failed to cover with you.
No, Jack is argumentative.
Saying it's characterized failed.
No, I meant
That he did not ask you about.
that's all I asked.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not insinuating a failure on Mr. Avila's part. I'm saying there weren't other swabs done on surfaces in the house that he did not go over with.
No, I believe we went through them all, yes.
Mr. Pursehouse was first arrested on February 15th at 4:30 p.m.
Yes.
And he was booked early the night of the 16th at 2:16 in the morning.
I don't recall the exact time of his booking.
Would it refresh your recollection to look at just the page 1 of the arrest report?
It may.
Sorry.
It's okay.
So date arrested, time arrested, time booked.
16:30. Time arrested. Time booked 2:16. Oh, 2:15. Okay.
So when that first arrest, he was arrested at 4:30 p.m., right?
Yes.
On the 15th of February.
Yes.
And he was booked at 2:16 a.m. on the 16th.
Yes.
And then he posted bail and was released on the 18th at 10:13 p.m.
I know he posted bail. I don't know what time he was released.
Would it refresh your recollection?
No, I had nothing to do with that.
Okay. And then he was rearrested on the 19th of February at 4:30 p.m.
I believe so.
Regarding the warrant to Google for the Google Nest videos and whether Google sent any files back, I have a question. You spoke to Detective Lamberti prior to your testimony at the preliminary hearing, right?
I don't recall.
Detective Lamberti was handling the warrant to Google regarding the Google Nest cameras, right?
I believe so.
And you testified about this at the preliminary hearing,
I'm
right?
going to object. That's Prop 115. Objection as hearsay.
Sustain.
I'm not asking what he said. I'm saying just.
Well, okay. Did you testify procedurally? Did you testify?
Did you testify about this topic? I'm not asking specific statements.
I don't recall.
Would it refresh your recollection to look at the preliminary hearing transcript?
Objection.
Well, he's not going to ask him what was said. He's going to ask him to remind him that he testified at that. Go ahead. Another 5 minutes, count.
Thank you.
We'll be taking a break in 5 minutes, ladies and gentlemen.
Looking at volume 5, page 114. Actually, let's start at 113. This is all everything. All right, here we go. 112, line 25. Into 113, line 4, or line 7. Does that refresh your recollection?
A little bit.
And so you did testify at the preliminary hearing about the efforts to obtain footage from Google Nest, right?
Yes.
And in preparation for your testimony, you spoke to Detective Lamberti about the warrant to Google.
Objection. Relevance. Prop 115 testimony.
Sustain.
Did you speak to the detective?
Objection. Relevance.
I'm impeaching Detective Lamberti.
I'll allow him to answer that question.
Did you speak to Detective Lamberti about the search warrant to Google?
Yes.
And isn't it true that he told you that there were no video files accessible to LAPD
Yes.
and that he did not get any files back?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
On direct, Mr. Avila showed you the DMV printout that you looked at for Mr. Pursehouse.
Yes.
The data on that document is simply what the DMV had in their system at the time, right?
Correct.
You don't know, at the time when you were looking at it, you didn't know if the information was correct, right?
I assumed it was correct, but I get it from the DMV, so that's
Right. All it is whatever the information that was inputted into the DMV at some point in time in the past.
correct.
You previously testified that you were familiar with the LAPD homicide manual, right?
Sure, yes.
And it sets out the department's policy for an investigation into a potential homicide, right?
Yes.
And in this case, responding officers quickly determined that an investigation needed to occur, right?
Yes.
And responding officers quickly determined that Ms. Harwick was gravely injured, right?
Well, I don't know what the responding officers thought.
Objection, relevance as to this witness.
Sustained.
So, the preliminary investigation at the crime scene is the most important and possibly the most sensitive aspect of a homicide investigation.
Objection, compound.
Sustained. Go ahead, rephrase your question, Counsel.
Per the homicide manual and how detectives are trained, the preliminary investigation at the crime scene is the most important aspect of the homicide investigation.
Per the manual, I believe that's what it says.
I'm gonna ask to be shown this document.
So is that what was your response, sir?
I said, per the manual, I believe that's what it says, yes. Per the homicide manual.
And that the preliminary investigation is possibly the most sensitive aspect of the homicide investigation, right?
Possibly.
That the best investigative method at the scene is to treat each case as a homicide until the facts prove differently, right?
I believe that's what it says in the manual.
Do you disagree with the manual?
Objection, argumentative.
Sustained.
According to the LAPD policy, the first officers to arrive at the scene shall immediately isolate the vicinity where the incident occurred, right?
Objection.
All right, under 352, do you have any other questions, Counsel?
This is just...
I understand what you're asking, Counsel.
Okay. I have like 5 more questions.
Go ahead.
So,
I got break.
the responding officers...
Yes.
What is that?
It's below his right eye, between his eye and his nose. It was some bruising.
Looking at photograph B, is this a picture of his torso and arms?
Yes, sir.
Now, on his left arm, there appears to be a Band-Aid of some sort. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Did you or other police officers place that Band-Aid on him?
No, sir.
Was that Band-Aid already on him when you met him?
Yes.
Did you have him remove that bandage from his arm?
Yes.
I have another series of 2 photographs showing left bicep. This remarked as people's next in order 110.
Yes.
110, photograph A, he tells what is shown there.
Mr. Pursehouse, he's raising his left arm, and the camera is focused on the bruise or contusion on his inner left bicep.
So you had him remove that Band-Aid.
I did, yes, sir.
And this is photograph B of this exhibit. Is that a close-up of that injury?
Yes, sir.
And can you tell us what is shown there?
Bruising with an abrasion in the center of the bruising.
Did it appear to you to be a fresh bruise or contusion?
Yes, sir.
I'm going
What?
to check to that lack of foundation.
I was going to ask.
All
Why
right.
did you
Hold on. What are you asking?
Did it appear to you to be a fresh abrasion, bruise or contusion?
Okay, he said appear. Did it appear to be fresh?
Yes, Your
And
Honor.
what are you basing that on?
basing it on my observations and having the same type of injuries and witnessing those injuries throughout my 27-year career.
All right.
Okay, so why would you say it appeared to you to be a fresh bruise or contusion?
Just because of the color, sir, and because especially at the abrasion point, as well as the contusion itself surrounding the abrasion.
Thank you. A series of photographs of Mr. Pursehouse. This be marked people's A through O.
Yes.
We'll go quickly through this.
That's 111.
111, yes, thank you. 111A. Is this a photograph showing Mr. Pursehouse standing full body?
Yes.
And did he appear to be of muscular build?
Yes.
And would you say his height was approximately 6'4"?
Yes.
How about it? Would you approximate his weight at about 230 or so pounds?
Yes, sir.
Looking at 11B, does this photograph show his legs at that time?
Yes, sir.
And there appears to be some scratches on his leg. Did you have the photographer zoom in on those scratches?
Yes.
Looking at photograph C, does that show a side profile of his right leg towards the back and his left leg in front?
Yes.
Photograph D, is that a photograph showing his legs and his inner thighs and whatever injuries you observed that day?
Yes.
And photograph E, is this a close-up of his knee?
Yes.
And what did you notice on his knee? On his this would be his left knee, right? Left leg, left knee.
Left. Yes.
What did you notice here?
On the knee itself, there was a contusion as well as a small abrasion.
Looking at photograph F, it's a picture of his right knee and part of his right leg.
Yes, sir.
And can you tell us what is shown here?
Contusion or bruising on his knee as well as some abrasions, and then farther down to the bottom you'll see several scratches.
Looking at photograph G, this would be a close-up of his right leg, of those scratches you were just discussing.
Yes, sir.
Can you tell us what is shown here?
It's his lower leg with multiple scratches.
Did the scratches appear to be fresh to you?
Yes.
And why would you say that?
I've had hundreds of scratches like that on my legs throughout my career.
Looking at photograph H, I'm going to zoom out. Is this the interior part of his right knee and right leg?
Yes.
And what is shown here?
You'll see more of the abrasion near the knee, near the contusion, as well as scratches to the lower portion of the photograph.
Photograph I, is that his right leg, the lower portion of his right leg?
Yes, sir.
And is this another view of a scratch we just saw 2 photographs ago?
Several scratches.
Looking at photograph J, would this be his left, the interior part of his left leg?
Yes.
And can you tell us what is shown here? I'm going to zoom in on this. Can you tell us what is shown here?
Scratching or scratches.
Photograph K, this appears to show his left knee, exterior portion of his left, from a view of the side of his left knee. What is shown here?
A scratch, but aggravated by an abrasion.
Looking at
Would you
photo.
object to that answer, a big scratch aggravated by an abrasion?
I will leave it. I will leave it as scratch and an abrasion. The aggravating part will be stricken.
Thank you. Looking at photograph L. Does this show defendant Purshouse's inner right leg and knee?
Yes.
And were there any injuries in the inner right thigh area?
Yes.
And what was that?
If you could zoom in, I could. It was a bruise or a contusion.
And I zoomed in. Looking at photograph. M. Is this another view of that same injury?
Yes.
Photograph N, as in Nancy, is this his left leg, inner thigh? Can you describe whether he had any injuries on that leg?
Yes.
And what was that? And I don't know if you could see also his knee. I'll zoom in. It tells what it's showing there.
More of an abrasion toward the upper left of the photograph, my upper left, as well as the lower right.
And lastly, photograph O. Is this a photograph of his right shoulder? I'll zoom out first and ask you, what were you trying to photograph here?
There was some superficial scratching, as I noted, on in the center of that photo.
It wasn't as deep as the other scratches on the legs.
Objection leading.
Sister.
So you call it superficial scratches on this?
Faint.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Cross-examination.
Just briefly. Good afternoon, Detective.
Good
Oh,
afternoon,
I'm sorry.
ma'am.
I forgot it. Forgot 2 photographs. If that's okay. So, my apologies.
Good.
I have 3 photographs of hands. May this be marked people's next in order, number 112.
Yes.
112.
A through C.
A through C. You got photographs taken of his hands, correct?
Correct.
And looking here at 112, it appears, well, did you see any kind of bruising, any kind of scratches on his hands?
Nothing of note.
You did notice bruising and abrasions on other parts of his body,
Yes, sir.
but not on his hands.
Correct.
Photograph B of this exhibit, when you had him turn his hands over, did you see any scratches or bruises on the palm of his hands?
I did not.
And photograph C, did you do a close-up photo of one of his hands to see if there were any scratches or bruises on his hands?
I did.
Did you notice any?
Not really.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
All right, counsel.
Thank you. Good afternoon again.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
So when you first, when Mr. Pursehouse first arrived at Piper Tech, he was accompanied by 2 uniformed officers.
Yes, ma'am.
And they had transported him from another location to Piper Tech so that you could meet them there and supervise the photography of Mr. Pursehouse. Is that correct?
Exactly.
And who had authorized this photographing of Mr. Pursehouse?
What was a recommendation by the lead detectives? It's something we normally do in situations such as this.
Do you normally ask detainees to be strip searched in that way?
It depends on what the person's detained for, but strip searches are normal with violent felonies.
So who authorized a strip search in this case?
I'm not privy to the booking approval regarding who authorized a strip search, but I wouldn't call this a strip search that's prior to booking. This would be photographing the person, whether they have injuries or not.
Okay. And were you
I'm
looking?
going to object if the witness hasn't completed his answer.
Were you finished, sir?
I was almost finished.
All right, go ahead.
Depending on the situation, of course.
So you had Mr. Pursehouse remove his underwear for photographs,
I had directed him to, yes.
and several photographs were taken of his naked body.
Yes.
And the area where his underwear would normally be, did you find anything of any significance in that location on either his buttocks, his penis, or any area that would have been concealed by underwear?
I did not.
But you continued to photograph that area anyway.
Well, when you say area, it was an overall photograph of his whole entire body to show a lack of or to determine whether or not there was an injury.
Would you have expected to find injuries on his penis area?
Objection, argumentative.
Well, it's calling for speculation, sustained.
When you told Mr. Pursehouse what you were going to be doing in terms of photographing him, did you describe it to him as a full body scan?
Objection, relevant.
Oh, Lord.
I didn't use that verbiage, but I 100% explained the process to him to alleviate any of his fears. He was very inquisitive, and I took the time to answer each of his questions.
You don't recall using the term a full body scan?
No.
Would that be inaccurate to call it a full body scan?
It's just verbiage I wouldn't have used in this situation.
And how long did this process take?
The process in terms of the actual photography,
Yes,
maybe 10 minutes,
10 minutes.
10 to 15 minutes tops. The photography,
You don't recall being there closer to half an hour?
there's a difference between being there and then the photography portion, and that's what I'm trying to differentiate from. Because we had to wait for the studio to be set up, so we were definitely there longer than a half hour, yes ma'am.
So you're saying from the beginning of the photography to the end of photography was only 10 minutes?
10 to 15.
10 to 15?
Yes,
No,
ma'am.
no more than 15.
I'm giving you my best estimate now.
Could have been 20 minutes?
I don't think it was. I think it was 15,
So you're saying no more than 15 minutes.
to the best of my recollection, yes ma'am.
And while Mr. Pursehouse was naked, the people present were you, the two uniformed patrol officers, and the photographer.
Vegas, while he was naked the entire time.
Well, while he was naked, I don't know if that was it. I don't think it was the entire time, right? It was a portion of the time.
You're right, Your Honor.
Okay, were there people present? What was your question?
My question is, during the period of time when he was naked, there were 4 people present. You, the two uniformed officers, and the photographer.
Yes ma'am.
And each of the photos that we've seen here today were the poses that Mr. Pursehouse were in were as a result of instructions given to him by either you or the photographer. Is that correct?
Correct.
Mr. Pursehouse didn't just decide how he was going to stand in order to determine how it would be photographed. Is that right?
You're right.
And you would give him instructions like look up, and then a photograph would be taken.
Yes ma'am.
And you would give him an instruction to squat and open up his legs, and a photograph would be taken.
Yes ma'am.
And you would tell him to stand with one foot in front of the other and bend his legs, and a photograph would be taken.
Yes ma'am.
And Mr. Pursehouse was cooperative throughout this process.
He was.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Hey,
Nothing further.
thank you, officer. You may step down.
Your Honor, some people would like to call Nick Sanchez.
All right. All right, Mr. Sanchez, if you could approach the witness stand here, please. Raise your right hand.
Do you solemnly state that the testimony you're about to give and the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Please have a seat. Please state and spell what your first and last name.
Nick Sanchez, Nicksanchez.
All right, Ms. Mariano.
What do you do for a living, sir?
I'm currently retired, but I retired from the LAPD. I retired as a criminalist with the LAPD.
Were you employed by the LAPD as a criminalist back in February of 2020?
Yes, I was.
What were your duties? As a criminalist?
Back at this time, I was assigned to what they call the field investigation unit. So my responsibilities included going on call and then responding to crime scenes when I was needed.
And what is your background training experience that qualifies you to be a field investigator or a field criminalist?
Well, I have a Bachelor of Science degree in medical technology from Cal State LA. I have some graduate level coursework in genetics and molecular biology from Cal State Fullerton. Upon being hired by LAPD, I received in-house training in regards to field work. That included lectures, readings, demonstrations, and some mock crime scenes.
Now I want to turn your attention to February 15th of 2020 at around 11:30 in the morning. Were you at the location of 2086 Mound Avenue in the city and county of Los Angeles?
Yes.
Why did you report to that location on that date and time?
Because I was on call. I received a phone call from a detective who indicated that he needed a criminalist at this location for a crime scene.
Did you arrive alone?
No, I arrived with another criminalist.
And who was that?
That would be Jennifer Francis.
Would it be fair to say that you and Jennifer Francis processed the crime scene at Mound 2086 Mound together?
Yes.
Upon arrival, did you speak to law enforcement?
Yes, I did.
What's the purpose of you speaking to a law enforcement when you arrive?
Well, when I first arrive at a crime scene, it's important to gather information. So typically what we would do is, or what I will do is I will speak with the detective in charge, and then we will do what's called a walkthrough, where they will walk me through the crime scene. They may point out certain things or give me information as we're walking through.
Did you also speak to photographers?
Yes,
Now, do you direct photographers to take specific photographs?
I do, yes.
Do they also take their own overall photographs of the crime scene?
They do, yes.
Now, you talked about doing a walkthrough of this location. Did you conduct a walkthrough of the exterior of the residence?
Yes, I did.
Now, I'm showing what's been previously marked as People 79. Did you notice anything of evidentiary value during a walkthrough of the exterior of the residence?
Yes.
Showing you what's been marked as People 79. What did you see?
Well, in this photo here, the blue doors, they are French doors that lead into the living room of the house. I did notice that the doors were damaged.
I'm zooming in on People 79, pointing to an area of the French doors. Is that the area in which you observed damage from the exterior?
Yes, it is.
During your initial observation, did you see any biological materials with your naked eye that necessitated collection at that time?
Yes.
Now, after doing a walkthrough of the exterior of the residence, did you go to a different location aside from 2086 Mount?
Yes, I did.
Was that location around the area of Ivar Street and Vine?
Yes, it was.
At that location, was there any evidence that was collected there?
Yes.
And what item of evidence was that?
I'm going to refer to my notes on that.
With the court's permission?
Yes.
I collected some speaker wire from that location.
And When you collected it, who collected it, you or Miss Francis?
That was collected by Francis.
And what happened once she collected that item of evidence?
Eventually, it was booked in the property.
Now, as you're collecting evidence throughout the household, whether it be yourself or Miss Francis, where's that evidence stored?
As we're working the crime scene, I will have a bag which is labeled evidence. That bag will stay with me throughout the crime scene. So as I'm collecting evidence and moving from room to room, I'm taking that bag with me, putting more evidence into it.
Is Miss Francis also doing the same?
She is.
Now, we were referring to something that you collected over around Ivar and Vine Street. I'm showing you what's been previously marked as People's 79C. Is that the item that you collected?
Yes.
And is this yellow sign that I'm pointing to an evidence marker that is utilized by you?
Yes.
Is that utilized by you throughout your evidence collection of a crime scene?
Yes, not this same marker, but markers similar to this.
Now, after going to this location of Ivar and Vine, did you proceed back to 2086 Mount?
Yes, we did.
Did you continue to do an exterior walkthrough of the residence?
Yes,
Did that walkthrough take you to the backyard of the residence?
it did.
I'm showing you what's been previously marked as People's 80A. I'm sorry, 80C. Did you observe the items that are depicted in People's 80C?
Yes, I did.
And when taking a look at these items in the exterior backyard of 2086, was evidence collected at that time?
Yes.
I'm going to name a few items, and please let me know whether or not those items were booked into evidence. A hair scrunchie,
Yes.
and that was evidence marker, signified by evidence marker number 2. Is that correct?
That is correct.
A dress, signified by evidence marker number 3.
Yes, that is correct.
A hair extension from a sprinkler by evidence marker number 5.
Yes.
An earring, which is marked by evidence marker number 6.
Yes.
A medallion with a chain, which is marked by evidence marker number 7.
Yes.
Some boots, which is number 8.
Yes.
And an arm statue, which is number 9.
Yes.
Now, I know not all of those evidence markers are depicted in People's 80C, but those were collected and booked by you. Is that correct?
They were.
Were some of the items I just mentioned also booked by Miss Francis?
No, but I should clarify. She collected some of these items, but I did all the booking.
Okay. So of the items that I just mentioned, which ones were collected by Miss Francis?
Number 3, the clothing. Number 4, the red stain.
Are you referring to your notes?
Yes.
If we can just note that for the record.
Go ahead. Noted.
Please proceed, Mr. Sanchez.
Thank you. And number 7, the medallion.
Now, you mentioned number 4, and that was collected by Miss Francis,
Yes.
and this appears to be a stain on the pavement. Is that correct?
Correct.
Could you indicate how this specific item of evidence was collected by Miss Francis?
We use something called cotton swabs to collect bloodstains like this. They basically look like a large Q-tip. So we take sterile water, apply that to the Q-tip, that's applied to the stain. What we're attempting to do is rehydrate the stain and for the swab to kind of soak up the bloodstain. Once that's done, it's packaged and it remains there until I process it and book it.
Is that the process that Miss Francis followed?
Yes.
Was she wearing gloves at the time she took a swab of this stain?
Yes.
And was a single swab taken?
It was a single swab, yes.
And how was that packaged after the swab was taken?
It's packaged into something called a paper bindle, and then that paper bindle goes into a coin envelope, which is labeled with all the relevant information I need.
Showing you what's been marked as People's EDG. You're referring to an envelope and a bindle. Is that the envelope and bindle in which the evidence item number 4, the stain, was collected?
Yes.
And is that how biological samples are collected in that procedure that you just explained.
They are, yes.
I want to turn your attention to, again, the backyard. Was there any other stains that you saw in the backyard that you believe necessitated your collection?
There was nothing that was collected, but something that was one I observed and tested.
Tell us about that.
In the backyard.
Yeah, I'm just going to request that the witness turn his report over unless he's refreshing his recollection.
All right. Whenever you think you have to refresh your recollection, just advise the court. In the meantime, you can turn your report over if you will. All right. Good.
You may continue your answer.
So, I'm sorry, what?
You may continue your answer.
So in the rear, along the property line of the backyard, there was an area where we were sitting and working. And before sitting, I looked down and observed what maybe could have been blood. So to be sure, I tested it, and my testing indicated it was not blood.
What kind of testing did you do in order to make that indication?
I do something called a phenolphthalein test, and that is basically just a screening test for blood.
And because it was negative, you didn't collect a sample from that?
That's correct.
Now turning your attention to another portion of the backyard depicted in People's 83B. Do you recognize this area?
This is for number 10. May I refer to my notes?
Your Honor, with the court's permission?
Well, would it refresh your recollection?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, I recognize this.
And is this an area in the backyard in which a biological sample was collected?
Yes.
And who was it collected by?
I'm going to refer to my notes, please. This was collected by Francis.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as People's C, which is a more close-up version. Do you recognize better what is depicted in People's C?
Yes.
And what is it?
It's what we call a photo ID number 10 on top of a fence.
And what type of biological sample was collected here?
We were attempting to collect something called possible biological material, and that is if I handle something for a certain amount of time and apply enough pressure to it, it is possible for me to transfer DNA to that item, and it's possible that I can swab and collect it, and it can be tested.
And was this chain link fence as depicted in evidence marker 10 swabbed by Ms. Francis?
Yes, it was.
Was that packaged in the same manner that you described earlier?
It was.
Now, after going through the exterior of the backyard, did you also go to a neighbor's property and collect evidence there?
I did.
And was that a skillet, which is evidence marker number 11?
Yes.
Now, in addition to collecting that item of evidence, did you then proceed to do a walkthrough of the inside of the residence?
I did.
Now, where did you go once you proceeded inside of 2086 Mount?
I believe we started in the living room area and then moved upstairs into the bedroom areas.
Now, did you observe anything of significance in the living room area that required you to collect evidence?
Yes, I did.
And what was that?
There were 3 stains that I believe to be blood.
Showing you what's been previously marked as People's 85. Does this depict the area in which you observed generally stains that necessitated your collection?
Yes.
I'm showing you what's been marked as People's 86A. Do you recognize that to be a more zoomed in photograph of that same area?
Yes, I recognize that.
I'm showing you what's been marked as 86B, signified by marker number 12. What are we looking at here?
Directly to the left of the scale, there is a stain, a dark colored stain, which is one of the stains I collected.
How did you go about collecting this particular stain?
This stain was collected in the manner I described earlier, using a cotton swab and sterile water. The cotton swab was wet with the water. The swab was then applied to the stain, and the swab was used to soak up the stain.
Earlier, you referenced conducting or seeing Miss Francis. Let me back up and re-ask the question. Earlier, you were talking about a stain that you had found and conducted a phenolphthalein screening test.
Yes.
Did you conduct such a screening test on this stain?
I did, yes.
And in doing so, what was the indication based on that screening test?
That gave me a positive result.
As a result of a positive result, for what?
Well, it's a screening test for blood because when we're out at a crime scene, I don't want to be collecting something that isn't evidence. So it gives me a little more of an indication that this stain I'm looking at could be blood and it warrants collection.
So because of this positive indication of blood, did you collect this particular stain?
I did.
Now, you observed other stains in that area as well, is that correct?
Yes.
I'm showing you what's been marked as People's 87. Or let me see if that's on, sorry. As People's 88A. And this is another photograph, and I'm pointing to an evidence marker where it says 14. Do you see that?
Yes.
What is that depicting?
That 14 there is depicting a scale to the left of a stain on the door.
Showing you 88B, which is a close-up of the marker.
Would you be fatigued, is how I'm interpreting
the way you meant it?
Yes.
Okay.
I could ask that question as well. Do you want me to clear to make it clear?
Are you saying, what did you ask? What did you...
Would you be fatigued, is how I'm
Was that
interpreting
the way you meant it?
Yes.
Okay.
I could ask that question as well. Do you want me to clear to make it clear?
Are you saying, what did you ask the question again?
Sure. Would you expect the decedent to be fatigued after being strangled?
Yes.
Now, I want to talk about the shoulders. Are there injuries that you observed to the shoulders?
Yes.
And what were those injuries that you observed to the shoulders?
So I'm going to look at my notes before I...
All right.
So she had an abrasion on her anterior right shoulder, but more interestingly to me, it was a patterned contusion on the front of her right shoulder, and then she had a patterned contusion on the back of her right shoulder. So the one on the front shoulder was oval shaped, but had clearing in the center of that oval. The one on the back of the shoulder was circular shaped, but had clearing again in the back of the shoulder. So this is on the right shoulder again. So my thoughts is that this is some kind of grasping motion where finger and thumb are pressing on the shoulders. What that does is cause the blood right under the skin where the thumb and finger are being applied rushes out, and it breaks the blood vessels surrounding where that impression is. So that's why you have that clearing in the center, but blood around it.
Now, I want to talk to you about her hands. Did you observe any injuries to the decedent's hands?
Yes.
And what were those injuries that you observed?
Again, sir, I need to review. There were a lot of injuries to her hands.
All right.
So she had a lot of contusions on her fingers, on her knuckles. So they're all contusions. Well, there is some abrasions on her knuckles, but she also had abrasions on the back and the sides of her hands, both hands.
Okay. Now I want to show you some photos. What's been previously marked as People's 47, 48, 49, 50, and 51, and I'll go through them quickly. 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, and I'd like to mark another photo, Your Honor, as People's next in order,
17.
Showing you what's been marked as People's 117. Do you recognize this photograph?
Yes, this was taken by the autopsy tech. prior to the autopsy.
And does this also document the injury that you observed to the decedent's hand?
Yes, and just to point out, if you look at all the knuckles, her middle finger, ring finger, and little finger all have bruises on on the knuckles, so what we call the proximal interphalangeal joint, but the closer knuckle.
Showing you the 6 photos of the hands that I just showed you, does that accurately document the injuries that you observed to the decedent's hands?
Yes.
Are those injuries that you observed consistent with assaultive type wounds?
They can be. Those that are on the knuckles, if you imagine throwing a punch, and the first thing that's going to hit the object you're punching are your knuckles. So those contusions on the knuckles would be an assaultive type of injury.
Are those injuries you observed to the decedent's hands consistent with defensive types of injuries?
So the ones on the backs of her hands and the sides of her hands are more consistent with her trying to block any blows that were coming her way.
And would you?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
And I don't want to. I would like to add that you can see that in the external diagram on the torso, but she had injuries farther up her forearms and on her arms too, also consistent with blocking those blows.
Your Honor, I have another diagram that I've marked as equals 118.
Yes.
And showing you what's been marked as equals 118, is this a document that's authored by you?
Yes.
And again, do these document the injuries that you observed to the decedent's hands?
Yes.
Now, you talked about these injuries or being consistent with someone holding up their hands. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you would expect to see these injuries if someone was attempting to defend themselves?
Yes.
Now, if the decedent were to brace herself from a fall from 21 feet hitting the pavement by holding out her hands, would you expect to see a different pattern of injuries than the ones you've notated?
Well, if she's assuming that she's landing on her palms, I would expect some kind of injury to the palms. Now, the palms take a lot of pressure to cause injury, but I would suspect that a fall from a height would be adequate to cause injuries to the palms.
Did you see any injuries to the palms?
I did not.
Were there any fractures to her hands?
There were no fractures to her hands or forearms or arms.
Now, did you observe injuries to the decedent's legs?
Yes, she had similar abrasions and contusions on her extremities, lower extremities.
Now, if the decedent were to fall from a height of 21 feet and land feet first, would you expect to see a different pattern of injuries than what you observed from the decedent?
Yes, and as I was studying for this case, there was a classic picture in one of my textbooks of an individual who falls onto their feet and causes lacerations, so breaks in the skin of the soles of the feet, and then the lower extremity bones, the tibia and the fibula, are driven through the feet through those injuries on the feet. I did not see that in this case.
Now, based upon your examination of the decedent, are you able to determine the cause of death?
Yes.
What is the basis of your conclusion?
All those injuries we've been discussing throughout the whole testimony.
And what is her cause of death?
So blunt force injuries of the head and torso.
And what is her manner of death?
Homicide.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Cross-examination. Who's cross-examining?
I am.
We'll start tomorrow at 9:30.
Your Honor, may you approach about scheduling with the witness?
Sure.
More of the trial of the Hollywood sex therapist killer is on the way. Press subscribe now so you don't miss a moment of this riveting courtroom drama as we seek justice for Dr. Amie Harwick.